Yes, ma'am.
So we might as well go ahead and get going.
Yes.
Work session, first thing we're gonna do is to review of proposed revisions to the introduction in chapters 1 and 2 of the comprehensive plan. And, glance through this. Did you you're not gonna do any presentation, you're just gonna let this do, or do you wanna?
Oh, well, I was just going to go through the slides and just kind
Okay.
of
All
show
right,
them
I
on
didn't know
screen.
exactly how you were gonna handle, that's fine, we'll do that, and then we'll discuss it.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Tonight I will be going through the first draft of the first three sections of the comprehensive plan. That is the introduction, Chapter 1 on background, and Chapter 2 on population. So, begin with a slide just showing the proposed work schedule for the Planning Commission for the comprehensive plan update, consisting of 6 o'clock p.m. work sessions on all these dates, starting today, of course, with these three sections. The next meeting is going to be on Thursday, September 7th, where we'll discuss Chapter 3 on housing, and then we'll proceed every other Thursday, every 2 weeks, with a meeting on discussing each of the chapters in the order they appear in the plan. So, the draft goals are on this slide for this comprehensive plan update. The first goal is that this is an update of the existing comprehensive plan and not a total rewrite. Therefore, the focus is on updating the existing language, tables, and data. The goal is also to remove any redundant, outdated, contradictory, or unnecessary information from the new draft, as well as to remove any unnecessary illustrations or maps or any tables or figures that aren't really relevant or necessary. And finally, our goal is to update the goals, objectives, and strategies in each chapter in concert, of course, with the Planning Commission and in consultation with city departments as well as our various boards and commissions. So with that said, I'll go through some of the changes just briefly. I also have the changes noted as a hard copy on that blue notebook on the table there, so if anyone wants to go through them, feel free to take a look at that as well. But the introduction is a brief section in the beginning of the comp plan just showing, detailing what a comprehensive plan is, what its purpose is, and also the comprehensive plan update process. The edits I've made are as follows. I removed a quote from the Virginia Code in the first authority to plan section. The vision section has been rewritten. The currently adopted comp plan has the tagline, "Building a Sustainable Community." This new draft does not readopt that, so it is not present in this. However, it takes the existing idea and the existing language and builds on it and maintains a lot of the same goals of that old tagline without specifically readopting it. Some excessive language was removed from a number of sections. The planning process section was, of course, updated with recent information about the CPT, how they were chosen, what their activities were. And finally, we updated the bringing it together section with the schedule for the Planning Commission. And of course, that's incomplete because the update process haven't been finished yet. So that will be updated when we've finished with the draft of the comp plan. So Chapter 1-1, which is basically just general information about the city of Poquoson. I put in a new vicinity map in the beginning showing the Poquoson's place within the state of Virginia. There was minor edits to the city description. There was removal of some excessive language in transportation, city government, public services. And finally, the chapter has updated information and statistics on the Poquoson Library, our local utilities, and healthcare providers. Chapter 1-2 is the history of the city. I've removed and consolidated a number of parts of that chapter into a single section. Some of the lists, like the list of first land grants, has been removed. Some of the language has been consolidated, and the geographical boundaries section has been consolidated a bit. The sections on the first council and attraction to Poquoson were removed, and there were minor edits to the first names and families section. Finally, Chapter 2, a bunch of changes were made here. The overview, introduction section was consolidated a bit. Some of the explanatory text detailing what population estimates are and what statistics are were removed from the beginning of the chapter. And the following is a list of figures and tables that were removed from this draft, either because they were redundant or because they didn't really present any relevant information or they were not that focused on the city as a whole, or if there was no data available. Some of the maps, including the geographic distribution of population maps, there were no relevant copies available with a recent data set, so those are simply removed. All the other figures were updated to most recent data available, either estimates from the UVA's Weldon Cooper Center or from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey from 2015. Of course, the citizen comments section was updated with results from our recent comp plan survey regarding the small town atmosphere question. The summary and explanatory paragraphs were rewritten at the end to more accurately reflect how Poquoson has grown more slowly in recent years and is more reflective of the city instead of Hampton Roads as a whole. And finally, the last section, additional supporting information, had an old 2005 ranking of the city with regards to its growth. That was replaced with just an anecdotal post from the Weldon Cooper Center's statistics blog regarding youth migration. So that is the brief summary of the changes that we've made so far, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You have a question. Under the changes, you do mention that you removed several figures or tables about the demographics.
Yes.
Such as the age distribution graph and income trends, but I do still see them in here. Were they redundant before? Were they in two places?
That's one of the things. A number of these figures were all included and then kind of restated, so there will be like a table for distribution and then there'll be a graph reflecting that.
Okay.
So I just removed some of the redundant tables and graphs.
Okay, yeah, because I see all the information still presented.
Right.
Thank you.
I have I guess a basic question on why we didn't adopt the same vision statement.
Well, that was what, one of the things I'd like to bring up. I didn't have any real guidance from that, so I just erred on the side of caution and just adopted the same language without the specific tagline. I think it would be appropriate to ask whether or not you would like to bring that tagline back and reuse it in the new draft, or whether we'd like to propose a new one or something like that.
Yeah, vision to me is sort of the thing that holds everything together. It can be a unifying element towards all of the chapters. And I guess it threw me a little bit when it said the document is not adopting the same statement. We're going to be a rewrite. We did not have the time to do a real revisioning out of the process. So I feel that by just updating our existing one with having the same vision statement would be appropriate. But that's just my opinion.
I'm going to preface what I'm going to say by being the fact that I'm a newcomer and I don't understand everything that I probably should understand. I'm going to make some comments. It'll probably be the equivalent of sticking a bicycle spoke.
Could you bring your mic up a little bit closer? I'm sorry.
Do I have to push this, or is it? I've had the benefit, let me provide a little context for where my head is, because my head may be in the wrong place, okay? A couple weeks ago, or at the last meeting, I think Angie gave me a book to read about how to be a planning commission member. The first chapter of that I thought had some compelling thoughts. And among one of the things that stood out to me was that we are sort of ordered to be, by law, actually, and by practice across the country in many places, a body that's, albeit unprofessional and volunteers, chartered with the principal task of representing the citizens' views about the community they live in. And among the things it says is that while we don't have any vote in the process, we do have the very distinct benefit of being set aside from the political decision-making and from the bureaucratic and other types of pressures that might bear upon the staff in implicitly taking guidance from its political masters. Not saying that's the case. I'm just sort of laying out the argument that this book makes. But the thing that sort of gels for me in terms of what we should be doing is to draw out all of the issues that are concerning the citizens and make them clear and make both sides of those issues understandable from both sides of the coin, so that our betters, our decision makers that we're supposedly supporting, have the best information inputs that they can have available when they make a decision. The reason I've sort of gone on this little side tour in these comments is that although I've only been to 3 or 4 of these, I personally feel that I participated in a couple things which I had very sketchy understanding of the background that was forming the basis for the decision on the thing we were voting on. That's troubling to me if I'm going to be a viable and contributing member of something like this. So, armed with that, I've sort of got this self-sense of if I'm going to be a contributor to this effort, then for one thing, I'd like to have a better and more comprehensive laydown of the context surrounding some of the things that we're involved in. So that's one of the things going back in my head. Another thing that sort of sent me to thinking about this was, I'm sorry, I'm having a brain cramp right now. I forgot Lee. Lee went to planning some sort of a seminar or conference here not long ago, and she wrote what I consider to be a priceless summary of what she got. And got it with me here because I underlined a couple things that I wanted to mention of. And paragraph 10 of this thing that she wrote, the paragraph is entitled Form-Based Codes. Character and design are important. Design is how people feel about a place, not a zone. And form is based more on what people want. And there are several interrelated factors in, guiding any such as we're involved in. Form is the new thing that's come out of the swamp, and where the old way was focused on setback limits and use. So when I think about this way of putting emphasis on form, that and on the putting emphasis on the place called Poquoson, to me that says I as a committee on this team here, probably to do justice to the job, should be more focused on what it is that makes up this place called Poquoson, and what are people concerned about? Okay, so that just sort of is a backdrop for some of my thinking. Then I got into reviewing the plan, and I asked for a copy of the survey results, and I volunteered to do an analysis of all the write-in comments, which, by the way, I don't have, which I will do, because in those write-in comments, they started on page 123 and they ended on page 170, and every one of them was a textual write-in. And I made it through a handful of pages, maybe 5 or 6. I made it through enough of them to know what the citizens of Poquoson were writing in, to me, spoke to this place thought. In other words, they spoke to the issue of the character of the place called Poquoson that they want to have. And then as I went through them, and I don't know how I'm going to organize this analysis I'm going to do yet completely, but as I get these things, my intent is to pigeonhole them into the boxes that seem to be suggested by the comments themselves. There are a few comments in there about schools, there's a few in there about other things, but what I'm finding is most of these sort of throw-it-all type comments seem to be more focused on, don't lose the character of this place that we've been living in here for 10 or 20 or longer years. So that was another thought that went through my process of getting ready for this. Then I sat down and I started going through this plan. And to me, it has a certain hollowness to it, its present form, that starts off with the thing that Lee talked about, where this vision talks about sustainability. But I have a completely different concern about it than you voiced. Yes, I don't think that sustainability is a vision. If I'd been here when this was written in 2008, I would have argued against it. Sustainability, I believe, is a strategy for getting somewhere. But how many people do you think would move to Poquoson because it's a sustainable community? To me, that doesn't mean a thing. Yet, language that's nested all around this term of sustainability sort of gets at it. It gets at the place that this is a bedroom community, and you go into some of the comments that people are making on the survey. They say, I want to maintain this thing. So to boil it down without getting into how to do this, to me, and I did a little research on what a good vision statement makes up and what a good mission statement makes up. And the bumper sticker for a vision statement is sort of an intangible articulation of where people want to see themselves in the future. I got to tell you, I want to tell my best friend that I was a participant in crafting a vision statement that ended up with, I want to be a sustainable place. Yeah, I want to pay our bills and want to have all these things that we buy into work, but that's not the end state that I would envision. And as I listen to myself talk, I think I'm becoming argumentative, and I promised my wife I would not do that, but I frequently break my promises to my wife, so I guess, and she's not here, so I'll get away with it probably, unless one of my neighbors.
But I'll see her in the morning, so I'll let her know.
So, anyway, having said all that, I think this thing needs to be rewritten. And so when you just blithely sort of sail in here and say it's an update, first question I've got in my mind is why? I remember, Deborah, from the last meeting, when you said your goal is to get this thing rewritten before you retire at the end of the year. I got it. But I don't think, I mean, that's a staff thing, and I don't think that you're going to be judged to be a bad person if you don't have a completed plan by the time you retire. I think you could be quite successful by having a re-articulated vision with some associated goals and objectives and key issues that need to be worked for the benefit of the citizens. So, other point I guess I'm making is I'm questioning why this is an update. The plan was written in '08. That's almost a decade ago. We've been through a lot. We've been through some interesting issues, too, that sort of suggest that the city's leadership doesn't have a good grip on what the citizens really want. Referring specifically to this Walmart issue that we faced. So another thing I'm suggesting is that will take some time is we've spent a lot of effort and got thousands of comments, I think, from this citizen survey. Why don't we take advantage of them and do a no-kidding, thorough, detailed analysis of what they're telling us, what those surveys tell us? If we've got half the community involved in answering it, why don't we take them to heart and do something with them? I went through this plan that exists, and the reference to the '06 survey is not compelling. It's sort of like, okay, I'm going to write this thing, and there's anecdotal selection of stuff from the '06 survey to help support the case. But from my cursory review of this, and I'll admit that I haven't been through the whole plan yet to see where else it talks about survey results, I'm not convinced that the existing plan does a credible job of capturing the '06 survey. I think that I think that we have a clear set of options. I think option one is to go the way that you're suggesting we go, the way the staff is suggesting. That's the no pain approach. And I guess I've just laid out another option, which has pain and more time associated with it. And in my comment, I see him getting this quizzical, you got to be shitting me look from the lady at the end of the table with coming up with what I just said. But you can scrap that word out of the dialogue there. But I apologize for that. But anyway, so that's my spiel.
Sometimes I felt like that, but I do try to control that a little bit. I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm not for rewriting.
Why?
I'm not for rewriting because I don't think it's necessary.
Why?
Because I think it's a good document with updates. And I'm going to tell you something from my point of view. For a new member, difficult task to be a new member. I was a new member, and I understand that very well. When I first came on Planning Commission, I felt very lost at times because there was a group I did not understand. And as time has gone on, I have hopefully experience in performing my task as a planning commissioner. That's nothing bad to say about any new. That's just a fact. That's a reality. As time goes, you begin to have that experience and a grasp of what. I just don't see any. There are certainly things in it that need to be updated, and I have some concerns about some of the things that are being left out, which I will make known here shortly. That's from my perspective. The comments that come in, let me say this, and I've said this a million times and will say it again. That conceptual views of what people that's a real difficult thing to determine because we have a somewhat diverse community. I will venture to say my point of view is going to be very different. And that is, or someone who's been here for 20 years. The concept that I have of this community is that it has grown. The growth has come. I've seen a lot of it. The small town atmosphere is not the same for some like myself. I've been here a long time. It's different, but that doesn't and come up with a vision. And I do have, I think, to a certain extent, a sustainable community is very essential because if we can't sustain our community as it is, it's nice to say that we don't hope to see not a vision, but it has to be part of the vision because we have a quality of life here. We have quality of schools. We have quality of community. Those things will require sustainability. They will. I mean, that's just a fact, a reality. We can't escape that. So we have to sort of have that in our vision. How are we going to sustain our community as it is? A delightful and a wonderful place to be. If we don't think about that and put that in the vision, right now, I mean, we know that our community is facing a shortage of students. And for us, that's essential because without funding, we have a problem. We're now looking at closing schools. That's part of sustaining this community. Education's always been from time beginning. So, I think you're certainly, I see where you're coming from, and I'm certainly not going to, I'm not in any way trying to berate you for that, and I'm not. Please don't take me at that. I appreciate your comments, I really, but I don't think it's a necessary thing to rewrite. I just don't. Update it successfully. We have updated this. I think that's what we are required to do. I've said all along, we're not rewriting it. Very to rewrite it. That's my opinion. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I feel.
I would certainly go on and say that, while I understand your point, the tasking that the Planning Commission received about 18 months ago was to update the document.
That's what I take.
So essentially, that was the tasking that we received. I think that the Planning Commission agreed to, and that's the direction the Planning Commission has gone. I mean, if we're going to go in a different direction, we probably should have made that decision 18 months ago. But the reality is, I mean, that was the direction we received. And I recognize that, the document is the comprehensive plan from the year 2008 through the year 2028. So we're not, we're updating a document, but it's a document that's supposed to last another 11, 12 years. I can't do the math. I'll just say that for now. I'll get back to the vision statement in a moment. That's just my thought. I mean, that was the tasking that we were given, so I think that's what we reacted to.
Let me offer a counterpoint to a couple of the impact of what you're suggesting. The last time we had a meeting, we voted on changing the zoning of a couple parcels out here on Victory Boulevard. I would dare say that no one on this group really understands what the citizens of Poquoson really want relative to that plan. But yet we voted. That type of thought process sort of fuels the comments that I made, because I believe that if we had a clear vision based on citizen input of where this community should be 5, 10 years from now, we would get these pillars of, do we want to maintain a good school system? Is that part of Poquoson, or is it not? Do we want to maintain safety as one of the key features of the city, or do we not? Do we want to have this, that, and the other thing? And once those are sort of laid out as sort of goals underneath this vision of the community, then there's issues that flow from each of those. For example, in the school system, the fact of the matter is that with the population going down, how do you structure the school system so that it becomes a sustainable system that seems to be pretty important based on some of the comments here? Because clearly there's issues. How do we maintain this small town community feel if some outside proposal comes in and says we want to put another big box store in here? I mean, we don't have a definitive view, I don't think, of whether big box is good or big box is bad, except for the fact that everybody rebelled when Walmart came in. But I mean, sort of that type of thing. I mean, I guess where I'm coming from is, you can update it, but you're sort of nibbling around the edges of a problem that really hasn't been tackled from my estimation. But having said that, I'm done.
Well, this is a guide. It's a guide. It's not totally matters on individual basis that come before us. We can use this as a guide to try to formulate what we eventually come up with. And I want to let you know, I want to make this quite clear, that when I make a recommendation or if I vote on a recommendation, I am fully versed in what I feel
You're fully
is,
what?
I'm fully aware, let me use that. I'm fully aware of what I'm voting on. Now, it's a representative government, and I have to try not to represent one small segment or one segment of the community. I have to take into, here's what I have to take into, right here, it says it. Community development to promote health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare of the city of Poquoson. And that does not include just one segment of the population. That's what makes this very difficult, because it includes the population of the community. So that's a difficult task. If it were just the people who come out and make their thoughts known, I wouldn't have any problem at all. I'd just say, okay, I know what people want. But sadly, there's a large segment of the population that never comes out and never makes their thoughts known. They did not complete that survey. That survey, if I'm not mistaken, then it wasn't half of the community. And I may be wrong, but I understood it was a little bit less than a third.
30%.
All right, maybe 30%. So therefore, it does make this position that we have to try to come up with recommendations that will be good for the entire population. So, you know, there again, I mean, certainly, you know, I don't know how to say that any differently, but that's kind of where I see. And I don't just absent-mindedly come in and say, well, I'm just going to vote for so-and-so because I think that's what I want. I don't do that and never have. I tried to take into consideration the entire effect that it will have on the population. And for the good and welfare of the entire population, always will. That's what I took my oath to do, and I do take it.
I feel a little chagrined that you've taken the comments that I made
No,
in a
this is
defensive
my-
way.
No,
But here's, and I've heard you
Just
make.
laying that
I've
out
heard
to you. I
I've
heard
you-
yours, and I'm.
I've
laying
heard
mine
you
out.
twice now make a statement in this forum that the plan is just a guide. The fact is, the plan is not just a guide. The
Okay.
plan, according to this little book, if it's legible or not, or if it's credible or not, the plan, once written and approved, has some force of law. And when you say that land used for Area X is general commercial, and somebody comes in and wants to make it residential, that plan has some force. It can be changed, but the person coming in should then be required to articulate the compelling reasons why it should not be retained in its present zoning condition. And I guess the comment that I made was when I heard the dialogue over 2 or 3 meetings about changing that zoning, there was no compelling explanation about why that change was being made, except for these points that I remember. One, the plan was done a long time ago, and when the land was purchased, it was originally purchased in GC, I forget what they stand for, and R&D, okay? And to make them marketable, it made sense to change the zoning, which inherently was logical, but it may or may not have explained a sufficient enough reason to change it if it had been described for why, when the plan was approved, those 2 things were R&D and these other 8 things were GC. I mean, it seems to me that that type of situation speaks to an inadequacy or incompleteness, perhaps, in the original plan.
If this is, all right, let me put this to you another way. And let me also tell you that I am not defensive. I'm only stating my opinion as I listened to your opinion. And I didn't feel like I needed to be defensive in your opinion. I assure you of that. If this were all we needed, there would be no need for this body. There would be no need for city council to take up anything, for us to take anything up on our agendas. We could give a copy of this to our city manager, and he could go from there. So I think this is a guide, and I believe it is. Now, that's my opinion.
I made that point.
That's my opinion.
I allowed for that when I made my
Okay.
point.
Well, that's my opinion on it, and we have differing opinions.
No, we don't.
I'm not defensive about it at all, believe me. But if I have an opinion, I'm like you. I'll listen to yours, and I appreciate your opinion. So, I mean, I feel like this is a guide, and I feel.
Bonnie, you said that you had some ideas on maybe changes, or that there were some changes that you wanted.
For me, and of course,
Yes.
I do think it's important that we keep as much as we can about our history, because to me, that seems to be, I think it's important. History is important. It's not valued a whole lot anymore, and I think I want to look over, I want to go back and look over what was deleted in that. Of course, I'm a member of the historic, and I guess I'm in tune with that. I think it is important. That's why I think our history is important, because that's what make. And, I think we delete a lot of history in our world, and it's important. So that also is my opinion. For what it's worth, it may be worthless, but that's just me.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I share your sentiment on the history piece. I think when this was originally written, it was a very good quality document in terms of going into the roots of Poquoson. I feel, and a little bit addressing what John's talking about, we all know that these chapters are not silos. There's an interdependence. As you read through the document, there's themes that have evolved. Taking our history, to me, if we sanitize that out in the document, I would recommend that we have an appendix which has kept that history written as it is for future reference, for someone who would like to look into that, because I felt that was a really, really well-written piece of our history. But I think as we go forward, I've been struggling with a comprehensive plan can be very confusing and it can be contradictory. I mean, we deal in contradictions a lot in this body. We try to make sense of contrary opinions and facts and whatever. So we're here as like the common sense group, team, whatever. We bring our biases to it. Obviously, we do. We try not to, but I try to be as level-headed as I can. But when you drill into the document, I think for us moving forward, if we're to have a clear vision coming out of this document, that I'd really like to see it completely reduced as much as we can. That the standalone chapters such as population, which is valuable because we're going to be making decisions, that it not be such a dense document for the end goal. That we come up with, say, strategies or goals for the city as a total that could then be articulated out to the greater population and also to decision makers. I don't think decision makers are going to take the time to drill into all, but that's just my personal feeling. Certainly, we need to know where we've come from to know where we want to go to, and I think back full of some of those background information.
Well, I would certainly agree with what Lee says. I would like to see as much information, as much detailed information as possible in an appendix or an attachment or whatever we want to call it, and have the basis of the document be as streamlined as possible, because I want to look at it from not the perspective of myself, but the perspective of, let's just say, hypothetically, a potential developer that wants to come in and do something for Poquoson. Do they want to plod through 343 pages of a comprehensive plan to figure out what it is they can or can't do? No, I think they want to be able to look through something very concise. And a developer coming in probably doesn't care about the history. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm not saying that. But,
But in an appendix.
I would like to see it done that way, and I think that preserves it as well.
I do too.
From
Right.
time to time. And
And
that's a lot of work one time, because it wasn't done, but I think it's a
And I
preservation.
think you can accommodate John's concern to some extent, those pillars of what are the essence of those chapters that will help our decision-making going forward and also be understandable and user-friendly to someone coming in, fresh from the outside and wanting to understand what our city's all about.
We pick up on that comment and try to make a useful comment here that's not argumentative. When you go into the population chapter, the existing plan, there is a wealth of information there, but to me it begs the question, so what? The real question, I believe, from a population point of view today, is what's the population going to be of school-age children from now until the end of the lifetime of the plan? Okay? I think that all this trend analysis should be aimed at how many first, second, and so on, 12th graders are we going to have in year X plus 1, year X plus 10, and let that stand as a statement of fact or a statement of a high-quality analysis that can then be used as an input to decision-making on whether we're going to tear down the grade school or build a new one.
Right, yeah, the
Okay,
so
and
what
with-
questions,
and-
yeah, I agree.
None of that is suggested in the existing document, and most of these pages can be thrown in the trash unless it answers the key question for why you're describing population.
I was really taken by Dannon's comment at the end, saying we have a huge gap in our population base in terms of the young people. When I was looking at the population, we have a strong competitor in Smithfield. I would like to see what's happening in Smithfield. When we look at the demographics, we look at the population, the size, and the median household income. That's our competitor in terms of attracting people. And I'd like to see, rather than maybe just what's happening on the peninsula, what is it, as you said, what is it that we want to be? If there's another entity out there that perhaps we aspire to, maybe that needs to be where our comparison is. I also share your numbers are great, but it's, so what? What do we want to get from this population?
Oh, and I'd like to chime in on, I disagree in some part. I think that the demographics are fascinating, and I think as a planning body, I think that it's so helpful to know how to plan for the future and plan for tomorrow, and how can you do that without knowing who we are today and the demographics and the age breakdown and the income breakdown. And I think that this is really beneficial information from a planning standpoint, is knowing the demographics we're serving.
I agree with that perspective. Let me make your point for you, though. You still have to answer the so what question. How many school-age children are you going to have? You need that question to get at the school system. How many people of different age groups are going to be here to get at the housing question, which you're going to address in the next chapter?
And that's in here. So that's,
But is it forecast through the time period, through the life of the plan? I didn't see that.
I don't think they have the speculative or the projected.
Projected, yeah.
Yeah, they just have, I think, through 2015, and that might just be the data that we have available.
There are population projections through, I think, 2040, but those are just the total population numbers. I am not sure if they have data that's detailed enough to give a by age group breakdown of that population projection, but I will definitely look it up to see if I can add it. However, I would like to add one thing, and that is that these population projections, not only does their methodology vary between the people doing them, they also can vary wildly between years. I have here the old plan, the current plan, which projects the population in Hampton Roads, or the population for Poquoson today at over 13,000, 13,300. And today it's barely over 12,000. So these population figures are significantly lower than they were 10 years ago. And I tried to reflect that a little bit in my updated language. So these estimates change over time, and there's no guarantee that they can be accurate even within the next 10 or 20 years.
I was also, I took my eye with the school enrollment and educational attainment. The school enrollment were they just based on projections, not real numbers on?
Right, those are based on Census Bureau estimates.
Yeah.
We did go to the school board for those.
Madam Chairman, I think, first of all, it's a monumental task that we have in front of us. I think the work of Dan and going through sequentially, chapter by chapter, is very helpful, but I think our end goal really needs to be that synthesis piece. And hopefully, by the time we get to the end of the year, that we'll have some sort of sense of some synthesis that then could be used for some very abbreviated summary, so that could be the public face to the comprehensive plan. Does that make sense?
Though we haven't seemed to get very far here. Sadly. And these were the easy chapters. So, I feel like we have we have sort of some agreement, certainly. Some disagreement, which is healthy. Don't have a problem with that. I think we have to nail exactly what task here. I think what Bill said is right. We are updating. I like the idea of the appendix, which you had mentioned previously. I like that because we can trim down what we are doing here, what we have, make it to someone who's coming in, like as he said, probably if they want to go into depth on some of the issues, they can go to the appendix, but a prospective developer, he probably wouldn't care a whole. If we could work towards putting those things in. What we've got to do, and we are charged, now, we were not told, we all have to kind of face that reality that we have told to rewrite it.
Be a different story.
It'd been a different.
Yeah, I think that an awful lot of
differently.
the process would have been different.
Right. But as it is, the valuable time that y'all spent was geared towards updating. So that do here. Not rewrite, but update. We can talk about there's no way we can be finite on some issues. We can't. Projections. We have to try to do the best we can with what we have. And some of these numbers, as you've pointed out, we don't have a crystal ball as to what's going to happen here. We can't. We can only make the best estimation that we can possibly come to. We can't look into the future and tell what's going to happen here, because there's a number of things that can affect this community. Not just school population. We could have another Isabel that could affect this community. Predicted. We don't know what's going to happen. There's a number of things I can sit here and say can happen. That could really put a damper on the whole thing. Hopefully we won't. I don't know the way things are going. But I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm trying to make us come together. Ask that we have, and from there on, we've got to go on to these other chapters, and we've got to go with the fact that we have to update these chapters. We can streamline them. We can look at what Dannon is suggesting. Things we don't think should be deleted, maybe we can appendix. I don't know. That's a good suggestion. A whole lot from staff. We've been running on that. Don't have any comments, Debbie, Dan?
Well, yes, Chairwoman, if I could speak to that. this is an update process, but that does not mean strictly it's just a matter of updating numbers and statistics. I would like to present these chapters to you one by one, which is why, with your permission in a moment, I'd like to talk a little bit about Chapter 3 to see if any of the real recommendations, the real strategies in this chapter could be, in these chapters, could be changed or updated with your guidance to more accurately reflect what the city needs right now. That being said, I'd also like to speak to Lee's point that the vision at this point kind of seems like there's like a general agreement, kind of a preservationist attitude towards keeping aspects of Poquoson, heritage schools, crime rate, etc. same, but it's not a really good consensus as to how to phrase that. But I'm thinking that, we could always come back to that section at the end of this process, once we've gone through each of these chapters and discussed the actual recommendations of the new plan, and then maybe by the end of that, it will give us a better understanding of what a more coherent vision for the whole plan is.
Good
I think
idea.
that's a great idea.
And it sounds like, especially with these first couple of chapters, they are informative rather than community planning oriented per se. And I think that we will have ample opportunity in the upcoming weeks to be proactive, to change wording, to be proactive of how we think, or we as a community feel that the community should be, and be proactive rather than reactive, so that maybe not all of our planning agenda items are reactive in nature, but we can have the opportunity to be proactive, especially with land use and housing and things like that in the future. And we'll have, sounds like, opportunity to do that in the upcoming weeks as we address those chapters.
Yeah, and then we can,
And to mention the vision, I agree with what Lee said. I have no idea where that previous vision came from, and I have no objection to utilizing it at all. I think it would be difficult for us to try to generate a new vision. I think it would be improper for 5 of us to try to generate a vision for the city of Poquoson.
right, right.
I don't know where that one came from. Before my time.
It was explained that it percolated out from the last,
Yeah, I read that, but I wasn't involved in the process.
yeah, it was apparently a little bit more extensive than what we conducted ourselves. So that's why I wanted to be respectful of that, since we didn't do that process this time.
Okay.
Could I offer an input to your comment that we should nail down what we're doing? Since we're on a mechanical approach to review this chapter by chapter, would it be a useful recommendation for us as commission to have an agreed-upon statement of what each chapter should accomplish once it's written? So, for example, I've already offered something along those lines in the population chapter. I think that if the population chapter is done, and you got a little thick ribbon on it and say, he says this is done, and it doesn't have a projection of school-age children, he gets a no-go at that station, gets a do-over. I think there's a couple, this sort of threads a needle between my concern of being too mechanistic about updating this thing, and us as commission members fulfilling our duties to have our fingerprint on the direction of the substance. I think we can do that in each of these chapters with 1 or 2 carefully developed statements that are a sentence or 2 long. Just an idea.
We all need to keep in mind our recommendation. Ultimately, it'll be that they can certainly override anything we say. We are going to break recommendations as we do always. Problem with us, chapter. I mean, that's what we usually do. To do that when we get into the meat of the discussion, I think we all, as Lee said, we all kind of have our biases or whatever we want to say. Kind of bring those to the discussion. We can't help it. Yes, we can.
Yeah, I would suggest, of course, I'm not real good at making short-term. I have to process things. I'm not a good immediate decision maker. It seems to me that the right process, since we're going to meet every 2 weeks, if we've had a pretty good discussion of population, we go home, we mull it over, that'd be the first 10 minutes, and we kind of limit it to 10 minutes or something like that of the next meeting, and then we move on to housing. And that gives everybody a chance to sort of assimilate what other people have said, perhaps, think about it and bring it back, because I think there's some very good points made. And I would add to what, without getting off on a tangent, what John said, one of my thoughts in Chapter 2 is I think there should be some implications. There's implications involved with some of these numbers. One of them is certainly school-age children. One of them is the fact that the population is getting older and we have no medical care in Poquoson. One of them is certainly that we continue to have a significant, 86% of our people work outside the city. And I know everybody's trying to work on the highways, but the fact of the matter is egress and ingress are important things to be considered. And those are just some off the top of my head. So I think it's good to kind of mull these things over and see if they belong in there. They may not, but I'm just trying to kind of throw that out. I'm ready to torture housing.
I guess one thing we do need to discuss, because we've got to go on to the last thing, and that is discussion on methods of receiving public input on revised chapters. And we haven't really discussed this as a whole, as a body. It's important for us to be able to, if someone wants to have a say, but at the same time, it's very important at a work session, as you can see tonight, for us to have every minute I think Bill and I had sort of talked a little bit along the lines of maybe setting
No more
to
than that.
receive comments at the end or at the beginning, Bill.
Well, we talked about it both ways, and the more I think about it, as much as I hate to do it, I think at the end makes more sense, because otherwise they wouldn't have heard what we said. There are good arguments for either direction. I don't really know, and I guess I really don't particularly care. My perspective was, I know it is not common to have a public comment period at work session.
It is.
I don't really want to start a new trend, but I also think it is appropriate that we try to make sure that we make it as open to the public as possible and give them as many chances. I mean, certainly they've had a lot of chances to make comments. We got 1,303 comments or inputs, but I think that it's appropriate to give the public some, but I think controlled opportunity to comment on some of these topics. And I think they would have to be limited to the topic of the day, but that's just my thought.
What do you think, John?
I'm fine with what you two said.
It's a great idea. I welcome public input in any way that I can get, so I think it's great.
Lee, do you?
Oh, absolutely. I
Is that
think
all right
that the spirit of the document that we're addressing, I think
At the end of the meeting?
yes, ma'am, yeah.
So that gives y'all directive on that last thing.
Thank you for that.
So with that said, I mean, unless we really.
Madam Chairman, we didn't address the open-ended questions, I believe.
Oh, okay, that's right, we've got to
Survey.
do that, we skipped that. All right, open-ended questions, and that's the,
I feel we have an obligation to the people who responded to our survey to make at least some sense of the input that we've received in respect to the folks who took the time to complete their open-ended questions. Having said that, I know, and I think I've stayed with several of you, it's an onerous task. I did want to share with you that I have received volunteers, two volunteers have stepped forward from the former CPT who have volunteered to assist with the effort. Questions 1 through, I believe, the 5 of the questions are dealing with economic development. I believe our session on that, on economics, is September 17th. Both said that they would be able to, was it? They said that they would be able to bring back,
September 21st, economic.
on economics, September 21st, yes, ma'am. So Robert Cox and Jonathan Hirsch have offered their services at the pleasure of this group.
I mean, if you're asking me if it's okay by me, certainly it's okay by me. I wouldn't task anybody to do it. If they want to do it, that's fine. As I've said a number of times, having gone through question number 1, there's an awful lot of subjectivity in there. And there's no way around the fact there's a lot of subjectivity in there. But that doesn't say you should do it. I just think we have to be real careful that we do not give the impression that this is the election. That 51% of the votes does not mean that you automatically win.
They understand that.
That's not what this is. This is an input. It has to be considered with many other things, including economic concerns for the city and the rest of the plans and all that. But certainly, they're willing to do it, and I certainly know Robert and Jonathan would do a great job. No doubt about that. A thorough job.
Do you think that they would be interested in some?
I believe it was the 5 questions survey.
Need to only do one question.
Commissioner Travis did one already, question number 1.
It was the,
This is a real bear. I don't know if you read through
what
those.
new retail businesses and commercial establishments would you like to see in? Bill, you took a stab at that one, right?
I took a stab at number 1.
Number 2 was what new restaurants and entertainment venues would you like to see? Question 3 was what new cultural, arts, and educational enterprises you would like to see in Poquoson? The city of Poquoson currently owns 8 acres in the Big Woods directly north of City Hall Avenue. How should this property be developed? And it's, please. Question 5 is what types of new land use or development, if any, would you support at Messick Point? So I feel that they were all economic development that would relate to that chapter that we're doing.
I really believe that if we're going to approach this analysis, I think we need to approach each question needs to stand on its own merits.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, it's not, no, these, and the thinking is they're called word bubbles. So it's looking at, it would be a schematic, a qualitative, not a quantitative, a qualitative analysis of what themes are coming up for each question that would be standalone, yeah.
So what you're saying is that they would be willing to take on all of those questions? Okay, gotcha.
Do all of them.
Okay.
But as each would be a standalone entity, its own, yeah.
The comment that I made at the beginning was I was volunteering, actually started on that same type of effort on the write-in comments that are not in the numbered questions. Is that acceptable or not? Because if not, I'm not going to spend the time on it.
So you've already started on an analysis of this?
The write-ins.
So and what's, are you taking the same approach, kind of the word buckets of similar responses come up and just have a metric?
I'm trying to identify the categories that the comment is in. I mean, clearly, if they say something, it signals what bucket it should go in. And the buckets, sort of evolve as you read the response. But to sort of guide me in my view of these as I read them, it seems to me that if we're going to use the inputs should sort of relate to the structure of the plan. schools, new businesses, what have you, you know? And I think they do, as far as I've got, except as I mentioned at the outset of this meeting, these comments don't fall into that category. They fall into the general category of keep the place the same, okay? And that gets to the comment, that's why I use your reference in your memorandum of planning commission efforts today as opposed to the old days, instead of looking at setback limits and things like that, are focused on the place. And some of these comments dovetail very nicely with concern over establishing or maintaining the place. So if you're comfortable with me doing that, I'll do it. If I've destroyed that with my exchange with the chairwoman at the outset of this,
No, I think you should join the team,
then I
absolutely.
don't.
We'll get you together with John and Robert. You could be in charge.
Let's make that clear.
I would have to say that number 6, being any other comments, does not lend itself to the same type of analysis
Yeah.
that the first 5 do, because the first 5 have specific topics. And so when you say, what kind of restaurant or other thing would you like to see, you have some buckets to work with. When it's any other comments, as you said, it's all over the place. Now, that's nothing wrong with that. I just don't think I don't think that your analysis would in any way interfere with things. I don't think it can be the same.
I'll just say, at the risk of condemning others and possibly myself, more data entry, I think it would be very valuable to have those 5 write-ins summarized. I don't think you could do it with the comment section or any other comments, because they're just so much longer and so much more open-ended. But I would support those 5 questions, provided that the people working on them kind of develop a shared methodology and make that clear, so we can understand how they tabulated it.
I'll get
you want me
Robert,
to do what I
I'll
said
get
or
Robert
not?
and Jonathan, yeah. You're on the team now, John.
You're on the team with Robert Cox and the other gentleman.
Yeah.
Robert Cox?
You raise your right hand.
And thank you very much, because I think it's, yeah. I'll
All right,
rest easy.
we'll do it then.
Okay.
All right, and with that said, let's go ahead and get to the meeting. I think we've covered as much as we can in the work session tonight.
It actually was very productive. Thank you. She doesn't want to do the ordinance amendment. Can you do it?
Okay, Sherry says we're on, so. He left. All right, we're going to go ahead at this time and call the meeting of the Poquoson Planning Commission for Monday, August 21st, 2017 to order. And with that said, I'm going to stand and give an invocation, and anyone who wishes to join me in that invocation is certainly welcome to do so. If you have no interest in joining me, you're certainly welcome to keep your seat. After that, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Father, who art in heaven, hallowed thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Okay, with that said, we will move to the approval of the minutes for the work session of July 17, 2017. Do I have a motion to accept those as written?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, Karen.
Ms. Emmett?
Aye.
Ms. Fenixon?
Aye.
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 Motion was carried by a vote of 4-0.
And we have the minutes for the regular session, July 17, 2017. Do I have a motion to accept those as written?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Karen?
Commissioner Travis?
Aye.
Commissioner Fenixon?
I need to abstain. I did not attend that meeting. I think that's appropriate.
You can still vote. You can
You can't vote.
You can still
vote.
Yeah, you can still vote.
It's up to you, however you want it, but you can.
I read them. I watched the movie, but, okay. Aye.
Commissioner Emmett?
Aye.
And
Aye.
that vote was also carried by a vote of 4-0.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll open the audience for visitors, and at this time, you're welcome to come and address the Planning Commission on anything other than the public hearing item. And at that time, you'll have an ability to come and address us on that, but this is something other than the public hearing item. If no one wants to come forward and talk about anything, we'll go ahead and close the audience for visitors. And we will move on to the public hearing item, which is proposed amendment to Section 1-23(1) of the zoning ordinance to allow accessory structures on properties developed with single-story dwellings to measure 1.25 times the height of the dwelling. Anna, you're going to give a little presentation on that.
Actually, he is going to change the slide to actually show the language.
Who's going to give that?
I'm going to give
Oh,
the
Debbie,
presentation.
okay, Debbie.
It's
All
very
right.
short.
Okay.
If you recall, in July, at your work session, staff presented to you zoning ordinance amendment as described by Chairwoman Shriver, asking to consider modifying allow a little increase in the height of accessory on properties that are developed with single-story homes. The purpose for this is to allow an accessory building, which is now restricted to the same height as the home, to allow it to exceed 1.5 to be constructed 1.25 height of the door of this. The purpose of this is to allow for the higher peaked roofs now being constructed that are used for law shops and things of that nature, but primarily because of the flood zone regulations. So therefore, that would allow them a little bit more flexibility than what they have now. The code amendment was advertised for public hearing. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Okay.
Debbie, I do have one quick question, and it really won't affect the vote one way or another, but looking around at it, I know we say this is for a single-story building. I'm not really sure that I understand the definition of a single-story building. Let me give you an example. My daughter and her family live here in Poquoson. They have a single-story rancher, but it has this bonus room over the garage. Because of that, the peak of the entire roof is pretty hard, and I'm looking at it, and if they had a building that was a 1.25 times the size of that peak, it'd be a 2-story building. But I don't know if that counts as a single-story building or not. And it's not really going to affect my voting here. It's just kind of a curiosity question.
I think when we are applying definition, I think our logic would, that would make it a 2-story structure. But just for height difference to accommodate one room,
Then, in other words, you could have a pretty tall building, a pretty tall accessory building.
you
in that.
could.
Okay.
And
I'm just curious. That was just a curiosity question.
And it's a great question, and maybe we need to bring this. It really came from a zoning variance request that was considered by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And a house that was built in the mid-70s. And so the roof line of the older homes are a lot lower than they are for the newer construction. You know, so it could be that we might want to think about making some provision where we're actually measuring the height of that structure.
I wasn't really trying to cause a delay or a question or problem. It's just something I pointed out. I happen to be familiar with, not familiar, but I know the house that was asking for it, and its roof line is considerably lower.
We said something, I don't know, I mean, I think that's a exception. You wouldn't run into it very often, but you.
A lot of the homes out where I
would?
live
Okay.
have that bonus room.
What if you said, how could you word it to say something?
I don't know. It's something that struck me this morning as I was out walking around, so I really haven't figured out the rest of it.
Let's think about how we could maybe clarify. I thought primary structure. That's a
Karen.
good, it's a good thing to think about.
Karen just brought up an interesting point. What we could say is the heated area of the
Over the garage, it'd probably be heated.
Yeah, well, but what was the
Then it
purpose?
would be a 2-story, I think.
Well, that was my original question.
Yeah.
If that is considered a 2-story home, then the question is really,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything. I just wasn't sure of the definitions. And again, it was just a question. It really wasn't a challenge. It was just something I thought of this morning as I was walking around looking. I said, gee, I wonder. I would think it was a 2-story home. Because they go up the stairs, there's another room up there, it's heated, it's got air conditioning. But I don't know how it's classified. And again, I doubt that it's an issue that's going to come up very much in the city of Poquoson,
You
but
just
Would
had
be
to throw it
surprised.
flying on. It would come in.
It's a great question. It's not one that we,
well, I mean, if that were to be considered a 2-story home for the purpose of this,
Well, you could actually already have a two-story structure on the property. That would be a fair way to implement it, is that it applies to all homes and not make that interpretation.
See how we moved out of
You've
that?
opened that Pandora's box. Our wheels are turning, Bill. I've got out my tape measure.
Yeah, and it is difficult to try to visualize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to whip out some CAD software and start drafting up 1 story and 2 stories and 1.5 and try to get perspective on this. It is, and I mentioned during the work session, I would love to be able to drive by some of these and to actually see and get some perspective on these. And there were a couple that I knew of, and those couple looked good, but I would be interested in seeing, the different 1-story versus 2-story and how much difference that would make.
Because on my end of town, a number of the, so when you have a brick 1-story brick rancher that's been elevated flood height, is that still considered one's?
You're pretty tall, but it wouldn't look any visually any bigger, any different than if the house is flat on the ground, you have one and a quarter. The visualization,
scale.
I understand what you said. I think that's really the logic for the whole idea. But I have no problem with the proposed amendment.
Well,
And it may be immaterial.
the purpose of the ordinance, prevent these accessory structures from towering. Time, the provisions were placed in the size of the accessory structures to 50% of the size. So there was a real desire at that time to minimize the size of the. Over time, the reason why you probably don't see
Got this amendment on the table here. Are we prepared? What are we prepared to do with it? Yeah, we got to do the public hearing, but are we thinking about, all right, we're going to do the public hearing, but I don't think we're going to have too much public hearing. But we'll see. But after that, be thinking about if you're. And at this time, we will open the public hearing on it. No. You don't want to, well, we'll close it then. You're welcome to come up here. We're glad to have you tonight. Well, we'll go ahead and close it, and we will now decide whether we've got this amendment as it's written. Do we have any interest in making a change to it? Are we all right with what it is? If so, somebody will offer.
I would say personally, I am all right with the way it is. It says single-story dwelling. I am perfectly willing to make a motion that we, perhaps the request that we ask city staff to look into definition of single-story dwelling and see if we've opened a slight can of worms, but as you said, most of these houses are done. I just really don't want to get into a whole bunch of legislation for a little bit. It was just a kind of a curiosity question that came to my mind as I walked.
You had no idea what you'd do.
Yeah, I was afraid I was going to do
The
something.
impact you, okay. Anybody willing to make a second on it?
Second.
All right, Angie. Karen?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Travis?
Aye.
Chairwoman Shriver?
Aye.
That motion was carried by a vote of 4-0.
Okay. All right, so that concludes the agenda for us, with the exception of any communications and correspondence from staff.
Just a reminder that we will be convening in this room on 6 p.m. to discuss the next chapter of the plan. In addition to that, City Council farm animal ordinance. It was originally scheduled for council's. However, because the advertisement included item from the agenda, and to go back and read farm animal ordinance that you all have recommended for consideration. In addition, the two applications by Economic Development Authority pertaining to their across Victory Boulevard will also be considered at Monday evening's meeting. Public hearing items are actually 3 public hearing items.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Make us aware of.
Nothing else from me this evening.
Okay, thank you. Karen, you have anything? All right, well, we'll just go down the line here. And
Chairwoman, I think the only thing that I wanted to perhaps ask is, myself being a relatively new member, as well as Commissioner Smith and even Commissioner Fenixon, I don't know if we would have time to anytime soon, but it would be really beneficial, I know to me, if there was any opportunity to revisit and possibly update bylaws, the Planning Commission bylaws. I don't know if that's a priority at all, but I think it would be helpful maybe for some of us newer members just to revisit those.
staff know about that, and they can certainly. Lee?
Yes, I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to attend the American Planning Association Conference in Roanoke. I just was astounded with the depth of information, context that I made there, and I just found it very helpful, so thank you. Thank you again.
Just very quickly, after our last meeting, there were a couple of articles in the newspaper that covered our meeting, and it was probably my fault, so I am not criticizing anybody, but the article indicated that I had said that in some of the qualitative questions, that perhaps some of the respondents did not understand the question. That was not what I intended to say. What I intended to say was that some of the respondents did not understand the instructions for answering the question. And I'm not sure what I said. I'm certainly not criticizing anybody. And there's probably not too many people in the public who are going to worry about what I said, but I just think it's fair to say that it's not reflected in the minutes. There's no error in the minutes. And it probably, as I have a tendency to speak fast, I probably just skipped over a couple words. But I just kind of want to clarify that. I was not criticizing anybody in the public for not understanding the question. And that's all. Other than that, have a nice day.
All right, and thank staff for organizing the work sessions and getting us going on this. Appreciate y'all's input and work. And we hope we gave you something to think about. Okay, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.